Hello everyone, welcome back to English Champion here on Substack. It has been quite a while since I've done one of these podcast videos. I've been doing a lot of writing in the last few months, and hopefully those who follow along on Substack or check in from time to time have found something of value. I've been wanting to talk about this topic today for quite a long time, and in the last few months, we've seen some of the elements that have contributed to this larger idea I'm going to share with you. And an article came out about 2 weeks ago. I'm finally just now being able to have time to talk about it. But it really encapsulated the real problem at the root of what's going on at many universities, particularly regarding this DEI stuff that's going on. All right. We've heard in the last couple months, again, from universities as renowned as Harvard or Penn, I think, was part of some of those problems a couple months ago. So other elite universities are also tied up in that, as well as just other state universities, large prominent state universities. Arizona State University is going through a big problem right now. They have a lot of problems over there with this topic, and it just has now come to the forefront and being reported on. But the point I'm going to make here over the next few minutes is that the DEI debate, while it's incredibly important to dissect and understand it and then remove it from university education, it's actually not the real problem. All right. It is a major problem. And so that's why I've titled this podcast, DEI is the symptom, not the disease. The disease is actually much bigger. And so that's what this article I'm going to share with you is about. It's about how DEI is actually sort of leading to the real problem on college campuses. And until we fix that problem, even if we get rid of the DEI stuff, something new is going to pop up, because this right here that I'm going to share with you is the real disease. So this article came out, like I said, about 2 weeks ago on the great website, The College Fix, which does a great job of reporting some of the craziness that goes on American college campuses today. Online, Stanley Ridgely has been very vocal on kind of rooting out some of these DEI stories at major universities as well. So check him out. He's an author who cares a lot about higher education. And the article that appeared was titled "Academics Embrace New Deficit Framing Concept to Justify Unprepared, Underperforming, or Immature Students." So even in the title, we're going to get some terminology here, as I'll talk about education terms as we go, that will paint a picture of what's really going on at these schools. All right, so the article begins this way. It's an open secret among college professors and university administrators that college students aren't what they used to be. So we're right out of the gate, it sounds like this is going to be sort of, old guy rant here, that, it's just a reflection, a remembrance of how things used to be when everything was better. And that's not one of these situations. This is real. Everything is way worse. If you're not in academia, you may not realize this, but everything is much, much worse than it used to be. All right. Again, that's not just old people trying to remember the glory days. This is real. All right. And you're going to see examples of that as we go through the article. Article says, they, meaning students, struggle with lengthy reading assignments and basic vocabulary. They don't know rudimentary algebra. They can't add or subtract fractions. They complain that deadlines, hard exams, and required attendance are impediments for their success. So what we're seeing right here already is the idea that not only are academic skills a real problem on college campuses today, but even sort of basic life skills. All right. And again, this is very real. We know from the data, I think it's somewhere nearing or maybe even surpassing 40% of incoming students at universities or two-year colleges require some level of remediation. All right. That's a pretty appalling statistic when you think kids have gone to school for 13 years, K through 12, 13 years of education, and somehow they need remediation. And that remediation is not Well, let's brush up on your calculus from senior year because you didn't quite handle it during your senior year. Or, let's practice writing that 15-page research paper a little more closely that you should have done as a senior. No, 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 no. Remediation at college for these incoming freshmen or just brand new students is not brush up on your calculus or let's practice our professional style writing. No, no, no. This is fifth grade stuff. Really, that's taught in remedial classes. All right, I've taught them, so trust me, it's very low level. It's from a math standpoint. It's dealing with fractions and integers. Can you add a negative? That kind of stuff. This isn't difficult stuff. Yet these are things people are getting accepted at universities who can't do these things. Again, writing. It's not even research. It's can you write a paragraph that makes sense? Can you spell at least reasonably well? Do you know what a sentence is? This is remediation. And if we're talking about somewhere near 40% of all students have to be remediated, this is a problem. College isn't college anymore. All right. So again, it's not just the academic skills though. Deadlines, test taking, showing up. This is just basically being not even an adult, just any sort of responsible type of kid. Anyone past like age 8 should know how to show up to somewhere on time and that they need to turn in their homework, that kind of stuff. And this is what we're dealing with at the university level. But it's not just that these are problems. The problem is that professors think they're problems. This is what the article says. Although some professors view these deficits as problems to be fixed, many in academia have embraced bits of pedagogical fluff intertwined with fashionable DEI that suggest there is something demotivating, if not bigoted, about acknowledging deficits as deficits and holding students to basic academic or professional standards, while implying bad grades and a lack of maturity on the part of students are simply quirks educators just need to accept. Right. So instead of saying, look, college has a minimal standard. You need to be this qualified to be in college and take these types of classes so that you can learn the types of things universities traditionally taught and or to be prepared for the working world. Now, to try to address those deficits or those problems or those areas where students are a bit incompetent is now that you're the problem. You, the school, you, the professor, you're the problem. It's not the kid's fault. It's your fault. So this is being normalized that it's not that students that they lack. It's that we need to reframe what lacking even means. And reframing, as we'll see in the article, means, no, they don't lack anything. The fact that they can't do math, that's not a problem. The fact that they can't read or write, that's not a problem. It's a problem that we expect them to do math or to read or write or to employ scientific thinking or anything that we do at the university level. By the way, the sort of one of the practical effects of this or the practical results of this is billions of dollars are spent in going back and reteaching things that students should have learned from 5th through 12th grade. Billions of dollars. And from the student perspective, many students, the data is pretty clear that any students who take remediation, there is a certain percentage that we know will not graduate. They just won't. They're too far behind. And they get to college, and even with remediation, they still look around and go, this is too hard. I can't handle this. I have too many other things going on. I'm too distracted, whatever the problems are. And they're not going to make it. So we have this very weird, complex problem that's 5 other problems all combined. That it's an academic problem. It's a basic life and social skill problem. It's an expectations problem. It's a money problem. And it's this isn't actually working and it's not going to work kind of problem. Like the philosophy behind it is a failing philosophy. So The point of all of this that we'll explore here as we go into this short article is that, as I said, DEI is just the symptom. It's not the disease. This is the disease. The disease is the overall reduction of standards, reduction of rigor, accepting incompetence, not having consequences or accountability. That's the real problem on university campuses. It's been that way for a little while now, and it's just gotten sped up in the last couple of years. Again, DEI is sort of one of the very visible manifestations of this problem, because inherent in DEI is that, well, you're not capable, so we have to help you. We need to make accommodations for everybody because you're not good enough anyway. So we'll adjust the whole system to accommodate you. That's really the patronizing, discriminatory belief of what DEI is. But again, that's just sort of the physical thing that you can see. You can see these crazy policies. You can read about them or hear from students or professors talk about them. That's sort of like the tumor or the lesion that you can see, and you're like, oh, there's a problem. We need to treat that. The problem is deeper. All right. That's just the thing you can see outwardly. The cancer is in the bloodstream. The whole system is infected with this. The DEI, yeah, it's bad, but the problem is actually underneath that. The whole system has been corrupted by a lack of standards and a lack of integrity in what exactly we're supposed to be doing at the university level. And again, this is, all schools. It's not just like, oh, these are certain types of schools. This is the norm. Every type of school, from 2-year schools to giant universities to small private schools to major Ivy League private schools, all along the spectrum, this is happening almost everywhere. There might be a few outliers, but many people have this flip. They think, oh, this is just a couple crazy schools and a couple crazy professors. Everything else is still pretty okay. No, it's the exact opposite. There are still a couple that are trying to do the right thing, and 90% of everyone else has gone on the crazy train with these ideas. So that's the real problem. We're dealing with a symptom. The disease is actually the standards and the decrease of quality in what higher education is supposed to be. So now we get into some of these educational terms that kind of make those of us roll our eyes who know what's going on here. The article says, one such fluffy concept is that of, quote, deficit framing, sometimes referred to as deficit thinking or a deficit model lens. As defined by education researcher Chelsea Heinbach in a 2021 interview, deficit thinking is the belief that there is a prescribed correct way of being, also known as the norm. And anyone who operates outside of that norm is operating at a deficit. These individuals, she said, are perceived by those engaged in deficit thinking as needing to be fixed or having to try harder and ultimately conform to the practices of the dominant culture. All right, several things in this paragraph. You really can't take anyone with advanced degrees in education too seriously. Again, there are some who do a fine job, but everyone else, this is what education people do. All right. I have some familiarity with this. My undergrad was in education because I wanted to be a public school teacher. And so that's what I did at the start of my career. But I quickly, ran away from that when I went to graduate school. I was like, there's no way I'm going into that mess, because education at the master's and PhD level is really a lot of nonsense for the most part. It's a lot of coming up with these froofy terms that don't really mean anything. And there's not a lot of real scholarship in it. Case in point, getting into an education program at the graduate level is the easiest program of all programs to get into. It requires the lowest GRE scores of pretty much any field. So that shows you the level of rigor that higher education at the graduate level has. So these are the people making some of these arguments. So you can't take what these people say too seriously. But also, this woman says that it's about, well, you're trying to make people conform. It's not a morality question. When people want students to improve or to conform to whatever the norms of either universities have been or whatever the world of employment is or has been. It's not that it's not a moral question. It's not saying, look, you're a bad person. It's not saying that I'm better than you because I believe in, rigor in education and you can't handle it, therefore you're less valuable of a person. It's not that. It's a practicality. All right. It's the norm or the dominant culture is based on practicality. It's what gets accomplished. What can we produce? If you have a bunch of scientists working on a serious problem in a lab or in some research experiment, and one of those scientists doesn't know anything about science or scientific methodology or math in order to calculate results, well, that person can't participate. The group can't say, well, we're sorry for having a dominant culture of trying to do scientific experimentation here. Here, come join us, even though you don't know anything. That's not how it works. In order for people to work together to solve real problems in the sciences, in engineering, in medicine, in anything, you need people to have competency. And so if you allow people into that group, and yes, there is gatekeeping involved in this. We have to have some level of telling people, you know what, you're just not qualified. Sorry, go do something else. Because when you break down those norms that she calls them, well, now you're running the risk of something terrible happening. Elon Musk just had this viral conversation about what happens if you lower standards in medicine. Well, people are going to die. Prescriptions are going to cause harm to people. That's probably just recently been happening. This is how bridges collapse. This is how terrible things happen, is when you lower standards and you let people into the previous culture of math or science or whatever it is you're talking about that shouldn't be there because they're not qualified. They haven't proven that they are excellent at this part of academics yet. So it's not that it's about a dominant culture. It's just like, no, what's the practical level of people being able to work with each other? Well, you have to be able to read and write and speak and do math and have some level of critical thinking and be able to implement a scientific methodology, all the basics that you have to start with before people can even start working together. So it's not about dominance. It's just about practicality and being productive and accomplishing things with other people in a society. This lady goes on to advocate for changing the norm to accommodate others, suggesting that minority, disabled, first-generation, international, and non-traditional students with responsibilities related to work or family are all harmed by the maintenance of such norms. No, it's the exact opposite. All right, this is how people get on the ladder to success. You have to fit in first, and then once you can fit in, then you can work your way up. But if you refuse to fit in or just are unable to fit in, you're never going to be able to advance unless someone changes all the rules and makes everything easier or just degraded so that now it looks like you're being successful, but you're actually not, because again, you still don't have the basic skills that everyone else has. So having this mindset really is harmful to the very people they think they're helping. Getting on board with what the general culture is doing, this is how you move ahead and be successful. Another lady, a PhD student in higher education and student affairs. I don't even know what that means. How do you get a PhD in student affairs? Again, there's no scholarly work being done here in these education programs. This lady is at Indiana University, Bloomington. She echoed a similar sentiment on a blog hosted on her university website. Deficit models, she wrote, are particularly problematic. Everything's problematic, right? As they subscribe to the notion that students and their environments are responsible for their failures, instead of acknowledging the role of dominant power structures in constructing those environments. All right, so here's really the key. We're trying everything we possibly can to not make people responsible for their own lives. You chose to not study your math very well when you were in high school. So now the consequence, you're in remediation. And now you're not going to study very hard there either. And so now we need to lower the standards again. And so now you're going to just pass your college curriculum without ever actually mastering, some level of reasonable mathematical ability. Well, you're responsible. You're trying to make the university responsible for your own failure. And again, it's not about dominant power structures. These people, they never define what they mean by that. And what we saw at the beginning, and we'll see as we go here, is what they consider to be dominant power structures are, again, things like doing your homework, showing up to class on time, being able to have a conversation with your classmates in an appropriate way. Like basic things. They say, well, that's part of the dominant structure. Those are cultural norms that are unfair to those people. Like, no, those are just the basics. And if you can't do it, even though you've been taught since you were 5 years old, that's your fault. You are responsible for you. So these professors or higher education theorists are trying everything they can to reduce any level of standards and accountability in higher education. She continues, instructing from a deficit model lens, she wrote, is especially harmful to marginalized students, overlooking their cultural strengths, diminishing the value of their lived experiences, and invalidating their community's sense of agency by assuming that educational institutions are the only valid sources of knowledge and rejecting long-standing cultural practices and ways of knowing. All right, so this is a very dangerous area. Read the book Cynical Theories by James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. They get into all this stuff about standpoint epistemology, lived experience, all of this kinds of stuff. They go into it, and it's sort of obvious if you just think about it for more than 2 seconds. What if you have a belief system that says, that, let's just use an extreme example, that numbers don't matter. There are some cultures where they don't operate on a number system. They don't count the same way that other cultures do. How does that person do any sort of calculations for any real problem, like in finance or in engineering or physics, where there are actual consequences to knowing how to deal with numbers? But what if you're from a culture where, you have there are cultures where you have the number 1, the number 2, and then there's a number that's just many. If that's your way of knowing numbers, how do you function in a real world, again, of finance or science or anything that requires knowledge of numbers or usefulness with numbers? How do you even function? It doesn't. Again, this isn't a moral thing. It's not saying, oh, you're a bad person if you don't know that. It's a practical thing. How do people get along? Well, you have to have some shared frame of reference. And if that frame of reference is math and numbers and you can't participate in it, sorry, you're going to be left out. We can't just go, well, I accept your way of knowing math. No, you either know it or you don't. All right. So when you try and tie these cultural things into it, this is where the DEI stuff is part of it. You're really on a slippery slope to making everything a lot worse. And again, it's not because we're trying to defend the cultural norms or the dominant structures. What you're trying to defend is the ways that people can get along with each other and actually have conversations and have a shared knowledge. These different ways of knowing, that's a real problem. And again, yeah, everyone's got different experiences. Everyone interprets the world slightly differently. That's part of being a human. We get it. But there need to be things that everyone can sort of stand on fairly equal footing and discuss rationally. Otherwise, again, how do you get anything accomplished? And that's what the whole point of education, and especially higher education, is for, is to bring all of the most important ideas of cultures together and say, okay, we're all going to learn this, and we're all going to dissect it and study it and challenge it and see what the strongest parts of this are so that we all know it and so that we can all talk to each other. Well, this whole platform is trying to diminish that. And That's a scary idea. One of this lady's recommendations for instructors to move away from such deficit models was to embrace another fluffy idea and foster a growth mindset. All right, so again, this is a educational buzzword that's been going around for quite a while. All growth mindset is be a human being. That's called being a human who was raised by halfway decent parents and taught by halfway decent teachers. Growth mindset is simply you try something, you're not very good at it at first, and so your parent or your teacher goes, yeah, that wasn't very good, so let's keep working on it. You'll get better if you keep working. That's it. It's common sense. Be a human being. You don't need to call it growth mindset, all right? The problem is, as we're about to see, is that these people don't even believe in growth mindset. Here's what happens. In its simplest form, the notion of a growth mindset may be innocuous, if not beneficial, as it suggests students should view academic challenges as opportunities for growth and see their intelligence and class performance as things that can be improved with effort. Yes, ideally, that's what it should be. Yet, in practice, some educators who seek to cultivate a growth mindset in students can take the endeavor to rather absurd places. Another lady from an education background. Stephanie Erickson from the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at University of Minnesota, for example, has decried policies such as not accepting late homework, deducting points for late assignments, and not allowing for revisions on large stakes assignments, as these policies go against a growth mindset and implicitly value specific norms surrounding work ethic, time management, and learning approaches. In practice, such interpretations of a growth mindset merge with another bit of pedagogical fluff known as ungrading, which holds that grades can be demotivating to students and has spurred some professors to do away with due dates, stop penalizing late work, and start allowing students to self-grade. All right. This is all real. You might think, if you're, again, not part of academia, you might think no one actually believes this. You mean that you can turn in your homework whenever you want? There's no due dates? Yes, you mean the teacher doesn't grade your stuff? You get to just grade your own papers or your tests now? Yes, this is a real thing. And again, this is at all types of universities, not just some one weird one over there. No. All universities are employing some version of this where, it's okay that you stroll into class 20 minutes late. I'm not going to count that against you. It's okay if you completely bomb a test. I won't count it, or I'll let you retake it. These are actual things. Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter that you turned in your assignment a month late. I'll still grade it and give you credit for it. When everyone else in the class did it on the day it was due, your month late turn in, no, it's fine. I'll take it. That's a real thing at almost every school. Trust me. And what's so insane about this is anyone with any common sense, anyone who's spent any time around children, or pets for that matter, knows how insane this is. When you think that relaxing on whatever the standards are is going to lead them to becoming better students, better learners, you know that that's insane, all right? Yeah, because when your 17-year-old sneaks out at night and comes home at 3 in the morning when their curfew is midnight, relaxing, going, I'm not going to punish him for coming in 3 hours late past his curfew. That would discourage him, and he wouldn't learn better next time. You think that kid's going to come in by his curfew next Saturday night if you let it slide that he came in at 3 a.m. this Saturday night? No, he's going to come in again at 3 a.m. Or worse, he won't come in at all. He'll just stay out as long as he wants. Again, any parent knows this. If the rule in my house is you eat your vegetables at dinner, and my 8-year-old says, I don't want to, and I go, that's okay, you don't have to. You think tomorrow night when we have vegetables, and I say, okay, eat your vegetables, why would they do it? You have already relaxed the standards. The point of being a parent or a teacher or a coach or anyone who's a mentor who's trying to guide young people on a proper path of being successful knows that if there are rules or if there are just norms, things that we generally do, and you don't do them, or you're incompetent at them, letting them slide at that is the worst thing you can do, because that just incentivizes them to do it again poorly the next time. So, this idea that not having standards and holding students accountable will actually encourage them to be better students is maybe the dumbest thing I've heard in all my years of academia. I've been a teacher for over 20 years. I can't imagine a more insane idea, because it goes against all common sense. Collectively, when these kinds of fluffy ideas are translated into policy at a university, department, or even just a classroom level, they at best provide a pseudo-intellectual justification for taking unprepared, underperforming, or immature students and moving them along without ensuring they develop the basic academic and professional competencies they lack. That's exactly right. Students from elementary through high school get just shuffled along. Happens at college too. Oh, you don't know something as a freshman? That's okay. Go ahead and go take your sophomore, junior, and senior level classes. Oh, you still don't know it as a senior? Doesn't matter. Here's your diploma. You're on your way. At worst, however, the embrace of such pedagogical fluff, given its overlap with DEI, can disincentivize those in academia who notice deficits in their students from acknowledging the problem publicly, and penalize those that do, thus ensuring obvious deficits in student ability and character remain. Exactly. So professors now are getting scared of holding students accountable. Here's my grading system. Here's my due date policy. Here's my attendance policy. Whatever the rules are of the classroom or the department or the school. Well, now any teacher who's like, yeah, I need you to show up on time. I need you to turn in your homework on time. I need you to be able to write properly with proper grammar so that people can actually understand it. I need you to be able to do your math properly. There are right and wrong answers. We need to get the right answers. Now anyone who holds that line is demonized. And so those people are now scared to speak up because their jobs might be at risk. So again, this is a very real thing, at all types of universities. For example, in an incident at my own academic institution, this gentleman is Daniel Nuccio, the author of the article from Northern Illinois University, when philosophy professor Alicia Finch stated at a faculty senate meeting, I'm just not convinced the students know how to do college. All right, so she's on the right track, but then she kills it by saying this. And I sometimes think, well, maybe we need a coordinated effort to teach them. Oh, she ruined it. She was inevitably and publicly dressed down by our Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for her deficit framing of students. We just had a conversation yesterday at looking how we are student-centered and what we're doing for student success, stated this vice president, prior to reading a quote on her phone from a source she didn't bother to name. It says, using an asset-based approach to student success requires more than the institution simply identifying that the students are having challenges, but explores the ways to which structural and systemic issues impair and derail student success. It does not position the issues or challenges being due to deficits within the individual students. Oh my. So the problem with this little back and forth at this meeting was that they were both wrong. Okay. This professor said, well, we need to teach students how to be college students. It's like, well, that was what the previous 13 years of school was for, frankly. All right. How to show up, how to read, how to write, how to do math, how to work in groups, how to have conversations and communicate properly, how to do problem solving. That was all supposed to be done. And now we have to go back and spend billions of dollars reteaching in a short amount of time, because 13 years wasn't enough. But you think one semester of college readiness is going to help them. It's foolishness. So she's wrong in thinking that. And then the lady who contradicts her is also wrong, because she says, no, the very fact that you think students need to show up on time and turn in their homework on time and be able to do math and writing and science properly, that's the problem. Those are the things getting in the way of student success. If we want our students to be successful, we can't have them being so stressed out about their math or their science or their writing and reading. No. Those are the problems, not the solutions. So these people are insane. And then she talks about this asset-based approach, which again, academic, fluffy language. Asset-based approach is simply focusing on your strengths. All right, saying, well, what are you good at? Let's emphasize that instead of trying to worry so much about your deficits. If you have a bunch of strengths, why are you here? If you're already good enough, why do you need more education? The whole point of education is to learn. The whole point of learning is that you don't already know it. Learning means I don't have it. I'm at a deficit. So why did you join an institution of learning if we're going to emphasize that you already know what you need to know? None of this makes any sense. So again, they're using this made up terminology to say something that is either common sense or against common sense. And in this case, it's against common sense, because why would you not want to help students get better at something that they are struggling with? Why would you not want to hold them accountable and help them learn better and improve to a greater degree so that they can be more successful, instead of saying, no, you already have a bunch of strengths, let's just talk about those? That's craziness. This vice president of DEI suggested practices, policies, and pedagogies that focus on fixing student deficits actually reinforce colonialism, subjugation, and inferiority of minoritized students. So again, asking students to show up to class on time is subjugation. You're enforcing colonialism if you say, yeah, your homework's due Monday. If it's not in on Monday, I'm not going to accept it because I've told you the due date. You have time to work on it. Everyone be responsible and turn it in on Monday. And if you don't, well, you're a colonizer. That's their position. She then went on to reposition the original professor's question as, how are we as institutions identifying the challenges and structures that we put in place where students are not successful? Oh, the things we put in place, like standards, like grading systems, like rules about behavior on a college campus. You mean those things? So she's saying the very rules that we put in place, which again are attempted to, in a practical way, help people organize with each other and work together. Because how do you function if everyone shows up at different times? How do you have a class? That doesn't make any sense. It's much more helpful to say class starts at 11. That's when we're all going to come together and work together. Someone strolls in at 11:30. How does that group even function? It doesn't make any sense. So these standards, these policies that they're so worried about, are the very things that we actually need to function as a culture. The other problem is when they say the structures we've put in place. We have been reducing standards for years, all right? I'm not even that old, but when I was in college in the late 90s, 25 years ago, none of these things would have been real. Since then, this is now normalized. This is a normal conversation because we've already decreased standards so much that any level of rigor, as they've been saying, is frowned upon. So when you say what we've put in place, you've actually been putting in place things that have made it easier for students, and they still can't do it. They still can't do the academic part. They still can't do the social, cultural, time management, organizational part of it. They still can't do it. How low are we going to go? I don't know where this ends. And that's, again, this is why this is the deeper cancer that's in our bloodstream that's infecting everything else. It's because how do you recover from this? How do you cure this problem? In other words, there isn't a problem with students entering college grossly unprepared. The article is about to conclude. The problem is college is just too challenging. Those that say otherwise are colonizing subjugators. Anyone who seriously might want to address student deficits should think twice, and the students that enter college unable to handle lengthy texts, basic vocabulary, or rudimentary algebra may very well graduate that way. Exactly right. If our goal is not help them improve, because after all, assuming they need to improve is an insult to them, then they're essentially going to leave the school, I guess, with a diploma in hand, as basically the exact same students they were when they arrived. So what was the point of all this? You came in, you stayed the same because you're perfect just the way you are, and I'm a colonizer and an oppressor if I ask you to try to improve. And so 4 years later, you're essentially the same person. And now I handed you a diploma. A diploma for what? What did you accomplish in those 4 years? By your own definitions, the goal wasn't improvement. The goal wasn't acquiring knowledge of the culture. The goal wasn't skill development and preparation for the workforce. The goal is make everything as easy as possible so that students never are challenged, so that they stay the same for 4 years. What is the point of all of that? You know, the extended problem of all of this is employers have consistently said for many years now that new graduates are unprepared for their careers. Well, this is why. When you look at the data and the employers are saying, you know what, these 22-year-olds coming to apply at my company, they don't know how to read or write. They don't know how to speak properly. They don't know how to show up on time. They don't know how to solve problems with coworkers. This is why. It's because from K through 12, they didn't get it. And then from freshman to senior of college, they didn't get it. So of course they're showing up to your job on day one or in an application or interview process. And yeah, they're totally unqualified because this is what the professors have made them become. That was the incentive. Don't be qualified. Because if you do, you're a colonizer, I guess. So it's not just the problem doesn't just stay at the college level. This is extending out into the job force. This also goes to how schools continue to get more expensive, and yet the very thing that you say you're doing for students, you're not, and you're charging them more for it. So you're diminishing the value of the very thing you're charging such a high price for. This is not sustainable. And this is why when you read reports and hear surveys about what people think of universities in America today, the trust in that institution of higher education is declining rapidly. This is why. It's because everyone's looking around going, wait a second, our students aren't prepared for the workforce. They don't know anything about our culture. They are unwilling to challenge themselves and focus on improving. And it looks like they are just wasting 4 years sitting around having professors tell them, no, you're fine just the way you are. What am I paying for? Why am I spending $150,000 or more for this education that isn't an education? This is what's happening. The people in education, the professors or the administrators, whoever's governing the various universities, boards, they're causing it. So this is unsustainable. I don't know how this continues. Another irony of all of it is that there's, in an effort for the DEI folks to be so accommodating of people of, let's say, different racial backgrounds, the very thinking that you're employing here is racist because you're saying you're not good enough. You're too dumb. You're too lazy. You're too incompetent in whatever way to function like everyone else is able to function. So we'll help you. We'll make it easier for you. And we won't require that you are competent and that you improve and acquire skills by the time you're a senior. It's okay. You don't have to show up to class on time. I know it's hard for you. That's racist. When you say someone can't do something when they're perfectly capable of doing it, that's racist. You're saying someone is less than, that they're inferior. Well, that's not okay. We at college are supposed to endorse. The whole point of education is to promote equality. The whole point of having standards is so that at some point everyone will be relatively equal. Everyone can read somewhat well. Everyone can do math somewhat well. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create equality by having standards. And yet you're saying, no, standards are racist. No. Not having standards is racist because you're saying some people are naturally inferior. And those of us who believe in equality do not believe that. We believe everyone is capable if they are willing to learn and to put forth some measure of effort. as we all have to do in our lives. And that's the thing with these professors who are promoting this. If you ask any of these professors what their academic life was like, years ago when they were working on their master's and their doctorate, all of them would say, well, I had to work really hard. I was reading constantly. I had to write all these papers, and I had to, write a dissertation, and it took me a couple years to do, and I had to go through this rigorous process, and it was tough. Yeah, it was tough. Those of us who did that, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to then, publish a book or to, present at scholarly conferences. Like, all of those things are tough. And yet you did it, but somehow you think other people can't. So again, either if there's a racial component, that's racist, what you're doing there, or it's just sort of elitist, that you think you're superior to people and that somehow you managed to follow the rules, the cultural norms, and the rigor of the standards of attaining a doctorate, but you think other people can't handle it. You think other people can't do basic algebra, and so you've got to help them. You think other people can't read and write, so you've got to help them. Like, well, you did it. So, for all the people who talk about trying to help the underprivileged, well, aren't you admitting that you're the most privileged because somehow you're better than everyone else? You figured out how to show up to work on time or show up to class on time. You figured out how to write your papers properly. You figured out how to do some basic math, but you don't think anyone else can. It doesn't make any sense. These people, they're hypocrites at every level, from a race standpoint, from just a elitist or even a class standpoint, or an education standpoint. When you say other people can't do it, why are you a teacher? It doesn't make any sense. There's a commercial I just saw this a couple days ago online that's kind of making the rounds, and it features this young lady who has Down syndrome. And she basically calls out people saying, stop saying I can't do things. Why do you assume I'm not capable of having a job or being in a relationship or even ordering a drink at a bar? I'm old enough. I can do that. So she goes through this list of all the things that people assume that people like her, people with some disability or some disadvantage, can't do. And by the end of the commercial, she says, assume that I can, and I probably will. It's like, yeah, that's what teachers are supposed to do. I assume you can show up to class on time. And if you do, I will help you. I assume you're adult enough to be able to do your homework when I assign it. If you do, and you do it properly, I will reward you for that. Great. And I'll help you do the next thing, and we'll work together and we'll become great together. Why are we assuming that we can't do things? It's so patronizing and condescending. And again, in some cases, racist, for universities to be employing these policies. I always try to make comparisons for my students because sometimes we think of things in such narrow frames that we don't realize the relatability to other ideas. And again, think of if we treat other industries like we're treating education, what would happen? Does anyone think like this in the world of sports, where it's like, oh, you're a horrible, you're an incompetent basketball player. You play basketball at a 5th grade level. That's okay. I should let you on my NCAA national tournament team, which is going on right now. Like, no, if you're not competent, you don't get on the team. That's it. Because that culture, the team of high-level basketball, requires standards. You have to be this good to be on the team. And if you can't dribble, you don't know how to shoot, you don't know the rules, you can't be on the team. I'm sorry. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you should go do something else. The military, again, finance, medicine. What in the world are we doing where we think, it doesn't, these standards don't matter. Music. Why in the world would, I go to the Phoenix Symphony several times a year. How in the world are you going to get in a high-level orchestra like that with professionals when you don't know anything about music? Or you've only been playing music for 6 months. Like, no. Competent people have been doing this for years of diligent focus and effort to get where they are. And now we're saying you don't need to do that? Well, then you're not going to be a part of those things. And it's not just going to be elite symphonies or top-level college basketball teams or high-level, finance firms or high-level medical institutions. It's going to be the basic jobs. You're not even going to be able to get those. You're not even going to be able to function in normal society because no one's ever required that you did. Why would we want to do that to young people? It's just a horrible worldview that these professors are employing, and it causes further divide. That's the irony of a lot of this too, is you think, oh, this will make us more together. This will bring us more equal. When we give access to people, and we don't we don't separate, we don't punish, we don't have consequences for people who aren't quite there. That'll make the playing field more level. No. It creates a massive divide because some people will still adhere to those standards, and they'll be massively successful. Because after all, now they have less competition, right? Before you had to compete with everybody who had to follow the same standards. Now, well, you're only going to follow the people, compete with the people who followed the standards from the beginning. That's an elite group of people. They become elites, and everyone else falls here. You're actually creating a divide between classes or whatever other groups of people when you don't have standards across the board that are rigorous and that you hold people accountable. If you are a parent or a student and you're looking for a college to attend, you should seek out the most rigorous teachers or university in general that you can possibly find. Don't get caught up in the name, because as we've been seeing, Harvard, these other schools, the name doesn't mean anything anymore from a learning and skill development and actual knowledge standpoint. That name doesn't mean anything. If you truly want to learn, if you truly want to be qualified for a high-level career someday, if you truly want to learn about our history and our culture and the values of Western civilization, you should focus on picking the most rigorous school and the most rigorous teachers you can find. Because again, 90% of the schools out there are going to be purposefully making things easy, and that's only going to harm you. If all you want is easy and you just want someone to hand you a diploma, that's what you can find. But if you truly want to be educated, make a concerted effort to do the research. You and your family do the research on finding the places that have the toughest standards, the most rigorous curriculum. They require the most reading, the most writing, the most math credits, or science credits. Anything that is rigorous, that's the school you want to go to, because they're upholding the traditional values of higher education. So, until we go through some sort of higher education chemotherapy where we kind of have to destroy everything on the inside to let things rejuvenate, the cancer of low standards, which then manifests itself as the tumors of DEI and other, problems like that, it's just not going to go away. But this is the real disease: the low standards, the bigotry of low expectations, the condescension, the patronizing, the money grabbing, that you're just taking their money and not actually teaching them anything. Until all this becomes more known and people start taking action to try to change it, it's only going to get worse. So truly, try to seek out those schools where they're trying to hold the line and being rigorous. One of my favorite movies and books is No Country for Old Men, written by Cormac McCarthy and directed by the Coen brothers some years ago. And the character of Ed Tom Bell is a character I increasingly relate to. I'm not even as old as he is in that movie, and yet some of the things he says apply to the world of education. He's a sheriff, and so he's talking about crime and violence and sort of the just terrible, not only immoral, but amoral things that he's seeing in the culture. And he, in one of his great speeches in that story, he says, the world is becoming something I don't understand. I used to understand bad guys. I used to understand the problems and the crimes, and you deal with it because I understand the difference between the bad and the good. He goes, but what happens if you now encounter a world that you don't even understand what it is anymore? It's bad, but you don't even know where it comes from. You don't know how it even manifested, because if you don't know where it came from, how do you try to get to the root of the problem? So he says, How do you fight something that you don't even understand? And he sort of very cynically says, you basically would have to give up your soul to be able to do that, because you would have to kind of become part of that world. And that's sort of how some of us are feeling. It's No Country for Old Professors now, where we're going, well, we've always known there are problems in education. We've always known there are different skill levels, and people come, some are more prepared than others. Okay, we as teachers, we get that when students come to our college classrooms. And so you can deal with those problems. But now we're at a place where if you try to deal with it, you're the problem. Wait, that's a world, that's a philosophy of education I literally don't understand. And so in order to even be a part of that world, like you kind of, like you said, you have to sort of give up your soul to try to wrap your brain around this. And I won't do that. So I hold my standards. I do not bend. I'm here to help students. But when it comes down to it, there has to be a level of competence before I let you continue. I'm going to hold you responsible for accomplishing the rules that everyone else had to accomplish. I had to do it. Everyone out in the workforce had to do these things. You have to do it too. And if you can't, I'm sorry, but maybe you should go do something else. If we're bending on that, I don't even know. I don't know what the word education means anymore. So, yeah, I'm starting to feel like Sheriff Bell as each year passes. So that's sort of a gloomy note, but that's where we're at. As I said, yes, we need to focus on the DEI. Yes, that is the most egregious and visible example of the problems that are going on at universities today. But trust me, the problem is actually much deeper, and that is where we need to address it at that level. And I don't know how many people are actually doing that. So take this as I'm sounding the sirens, but that's what needs to happen. And along the way, yeah, if you address that, the DEI will take care of itself. But if you take out the DEI, trust me, something else will replace it. Just like if you cut out a tumor, it's a good chance another one's just going to come right behind it anyway. You need to get to the root of the problem. Low standards, the diminishing reputations and quality of what higher education used to be, that's the real problem. Stay tuned next time. Keep reading. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching.